Today we're previewing the Princess Sofia Regatta in Palma, Spain. With me is Rob Hemming. Rob is a former member of the national team competing in the Finn class, where he rose to a top ranking of 30th in the world. He was also a coach at the 2020 Olympics, and most recently was the helmsman of Canada's entry into the Star Sailors League Gold Cup. Outside of competing, Rob is also on the Sail Canada Board of Directors as an athlete director. So Rob Hemming, welcome to the podcast.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So tell me about that regatta, the Star Sailors League, because I have talked to both Chris Waters twice and Sarah Douglas about that series. But you guys actually did it. You were driving. Tell me about it. How was it?
Well, it was pretty spectacular, really. I've never been to the Canary Islands, and I know that's where a lot of our teams now train in the wintertime. It was a perfect venue. The temperatures are fantastic. The boats are, very neat, the way they've modified them up to make them, level for all. We came together pretty quickly. I wasn't supposed to be the guy driving the boat. I was really just there to organize it. And then we kind of came up with this idea with Richard, who was originally the team captain. And
this is Richard Clark.
Richard Clark, yeah. And
legend.
He was a pretty busy guy professionally in the sailing space. And he was like, okay, look, whatever you can do to help, let's put something together. So in the end, it was kind of a bit of a scramble, and we put together what was a pretty good team. I was probably just lucky to be there, and like I said, the experience was phenomenal. And I think it's a format that's going to be successful if they can stick with it. So that's yeah. Anything they need from me, I'm happy to continue to help. But hopefully, we'll have somebody with a gold medal driving the boat next.
Oh, hopefully. Definitely. Well, I wanted to, because in my email with you originally, you said that your pathway was far from typical. I'm very interested in non-typical pathways. Can you kind of take me through your arc from learning to sail to becoming a member of the national team and now coaching and so forth?
Yeah, I grew up in Ottawa, and sailing on the Ottawa River presents some challenges that make you fairly astute to changes in wind and maybe a pretty good light air sailor. But I'll add it is the birthplace of the laser, according to Mr. Bruce Kirby.
Okay,
we still say that when he's at Britannia. So that was kind of the natural move. When you're there, is to sail lasers, and we had a reasonably good young group, but I got poached by RCYC when I was younger and went down and trained at, now I live in Toronto, but that's sort of what really brought my level up, was sailing with the national team guys then, which was just like, Bernard Lutmer and Oscar Johansson and Chris Cook would jump in, and like those guys were always around. And then I actually had to stop sailing for a little while because I had a series of unfortunate knee injuries that pretty much prevented me from being able to train, and that's where I started coaching. So I started coaching and doing odd jobs like construction and stuff like that on the side, and eventually, I guess because Al Clark is from Ottawa, he was visiting his family over Christmas time, and he convinced me to buy this what became known as the museum piece Finn from out west, and he dragged it down to Miami for me.
Did it have a wooden keel, or?
Well, it did have a wooden rudder. It did have the finest wooden rudder, and so the guys, were all laughing. I think maybe the second or third day I was leading at the Windward Mark and around at the World Cup, and people were like, "How like?" So that was kind of what really got the Finn career started, and our Finn program probably at the time was refreshing with Chris Cook kind of retired at the time. And still a lot of support we had with a lot of boats. We had, I think, the Phelan Foundation at the time had a fleet of about 4 or 5 fins, so I was able to upgrade out of the old wooden boat to fairly competitive hull, and that was sort of where I got started in the Finn fleet. And as I said, it's an amazing fleet for camaraderie across all the different countries, and everybody really works together to to build each other up. So that, it was a special time sailing a fin for sure.
It's amazing, like the Finn class in Canada, even though, it's a small country, you never have a huge fleet of them. I mean, but you go all the way back to Bruce Kirby, in fact, who used to race fins. I think he was in the top 10 in the Olympics at one point. All the way, Larry Lemieux and Hank Lammons and Gordy Anderson and Chris Cook and, Greg Douglas, Tom Ramshaw. There was never a drop. Like, we always had really top level fin sailors, and I am going to blame Ken Duell, to be honest. he's the one consistent part of all of that success.
Yeah, I think it's always been sort of the previous generation pulling the younger generation through that helped sort of maintain that we'll say institutional knowledge in the fin fleet. And it's so it was certainly sad to see that they couldn't keep it in the Olympics, and I know it was pretty close in the World Council to keep it or how they were going to move. But I guess, what is it, 60 or 70-year-old boat design with upgrades obviously these days, but now I think instead of a solid aluminum slab, we've got boats that foil, so that's the future and that's where we're headed. So
yep. Well, let's get into it. Let's get into our preview of the Palma Princess Sofia Regatta. If you could start by explaining, give us a primer. It's sort of complicated, but hopefully we'll make it as simple as possible as to how a sailor from Canada, from beginning of the quad to end, would actually qualify for the games. Like, what's the process?
So the first chance to qualify is at the World Championships, coming in the top 8 and being more than 10 boats in front of the next boat from Canada. So that would be the first chance to lock down a spot. And then subsequently, each class has two events that are totaled to give out the selection is decided that way.
Right. So you need to first, for anyone who's like brand new to this, you need the country. We need to get a spot for the country, and then after that, the sailors within this country, whether or not it's the person who qualified the country or not, have to then qualify through Sail Canada to be the selected sailor for the event or for the Olympics, right?
Yeah. And then as I said, there is the last chance qualifier, which is again now later than it had been in prior
right.
Olympics.
We'll get into that in a minute. So we're going into the Palma Regatta, which is could be the second or the first, but it is one of the two qualifying events for our sailors. And some of them, like you say, this is the first event, they haven't had their worlds yet. And some of them, it's the second event, they have had their worlds. But just you've sailed in Palma before, what's it like there? Why is it the place everyone wants to go?
Well, it's you can get kind of anything. I think we've been there and you're flying in and there's snow on the mountaintops and you're a little bit worried, or snow on the palm trees even, but often it's
snow on the palm trees.
Well, that was only one year, and it was earlier in March, but that was I think we've also been there, and it's you're wearing shorts and a t-shirt, and it's pretty warm. The European countries love it because you can sail there at that time of year comfortably, mostly, and because of all the road cycling as well. So a lot of pro cycling teams also train there at that time of the year. So a big part of sailing now is that off the water training, and it's done on a bike mostly, and that's one of the best places in the world to do.
Oh wow. Okay, yeah, I didn't know that. That makes sense.
It's a huge bay. Like there's a photo out there somewhere where a Nimitz class aircraft carrier sails in during the event, and it's obviously it's a big deal, but all the fleets were still spread out on race courses, and this aircraft carrier cruises through, and so it's a huge bay. It's got uh, you know almost any compass bearing. So you have strong wind offshore, onshore, side on breeze. You have light air. You can get 5 or 6 days where it's 20 knots every day. Huge range of conditions. It's not. I wouldn't call it like a very shifty location unless it's offshore. Uh, it's a little more depending on which course you're on and what the direction is. It can be a little more one-sided track. Doesn't necessarily mean it's always left, but sometimes it does favor a side. It's definitely a longer tack than punching it up on every shift, and so it brings a lot of conditions, and I think that's another reason why a lot of the countries like training there because of how
You heard it here first, kids. Rob Hemming says bang left in Palma every time.
well, you can't
That's it.
sail
We
to the
gotta-
cliffs.
I was recently raced in Newport at the Masters North Americans last year, and it was just a ripping tide right through the middle of the course. So it was just get out to the side, and like we were all just hugging the coast, like going inside pilings, old wharves and stuff like that, just try to get out of the basically like reaching off to get out of the current as fast as possible. But so if we go starting by qualified, the fleets that have already qualified the country. We did talk about the FX, and I just had Georgia and Antonia on the podcast, and what an incredible story that they were able to qualify, and even like someone like me who follows this very closely didn't know that was a possibility, and so it was pretty cool that happened.
Yeah, they really have had a lot of great results internationally at some of the big events, and so it was really nice to see them put it all together and really just put the hammer down on the last day, and then see them in the medal race. Really just they really obviously enjoy that conditions. It kind of looked a bit like St. Margaret's Bay to me, but maybe that was why they liked it so much. But no, it's fantastic. I mean, both teams are have really been very sharp, and so I'd be remiss not to say that Ali and Mariah also have had a really fantastic quad. I know they they medaled in the Pan Am Games, and so I'm sure they're probably a bit torn up about it, but that's how the best teams are formed, is when there's really two or more great teams pushing each other all the way.
Yeah, that's been my, ever since I started this in May of 2022, and I don't know how many times I've mentioned that matchup, Ali and Mariah versus Georgia and Antonia, because, you got two teams ranked the top 10, and you've got one, it's been all this time I've been saying, like, literally get your popcorn, get ready for this. I thought there was going to be some kind of weird, like, mid-fleet match race at Palma or something like that, and then boom, they got it. Like, it was over. It was still super exciting. It was all live. We could see it. It was crazy drone shots, everything. We saw them wipe out after the finish of one of the races. Like, it was great. I still ate lots of popcorn watching it, but we didn't get the second event, and it's true. I obviously, it's a real bummer for Ali and Mariah. Amazing sailors, have had a great career, and I think they said something cryptic in their email saying that we're going to have a big announcement about something coming up. So I don't know, maybe they're going to start a foiling team or something.
Well, I'll have to press Mariah about what the secrets are, but I think they've got nothing to be ashamed of. I'm sure looking back, they'll still be able to be pretty proud. And on the flip side of it, obviously, Georgia and Antonia, obviously, themselves probably felt a little bit pressed from missing out on going to the Pan Am Games, and so they rebounded, very well with that. So, I think the future's bright there for both of those teams, whatever they choose to do.
Right. Not to get onto this too much, but as a commentator, not a board of directors person, I can say that I think that it was, we need to have a team at Pan Am's to qualify the country, and if we didn't, we might not have. But meanwhile, at the same time, Georgia and Antonia got to do Europeans, which would have been obviously a better tune-up event than being at Pan Am's with only 5 other boats. So I don't know, World Sailing, give us a different place to get qualified, or I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like they've been playing around with how to qualify countries and to make sure that there's as much as they can find a balance between regionally having teams representing, the whole world versus, the primarily the best sailing and the best circuit is in Europe and centered around the European circuit. So, this is one of the things where we have to come up with a formula for how we choose our nominees. And I think, the Pan Am Games in South America in November, like that's a tough ask, for a lot of programs. That would be a time that they're, retooling or, refocusing for the upcoming season. So that's, it's kind of how it goes. Usually the Pan Am Games are in July or around the same time as the Olympics. So it was a
Yeah.
tough cycle for them, because if you were in Santiago in July, you might not make it back off the water.
Right. Okay, so we'll start off with of the qualified countries, the boats that we're going to be racing off in Palma. We'll start with Ilka 6, and we got Sarah Douglas and Claire Gravely, both former guests of the Whitecap podcast. So Sarah's got a pretty solid lead, and she's got to be our number one kind of medal hope. So yeah, what can you tell me about that series?
Well, certainly, Sarah is a former champion of the event in Palma, and I think if I go back, she'd won before the medal race, and I think had she also, she was basically doing victory lap. Had she pushed on to win the medal race as well, I think she would have won the overall trophy for the whole event. So which they have, which is actually the Princess Sofia Trophy, and they award it outside of the cathedral in a big ceremony. And so Sarah's pretty strong in Palma, and I think you could be fairly certain she's gonna bring her A game and have a great result. Clara was doing very well at the Worlds in Argentina's, and just had a bit of a fall off at the end in Gold Fleet, I guess, and that was kind of where the separation came, because they were very close, halfway through the event. I think Clara probably, putting 20 points on Sarah in Palma is going to be a challenge. I think Sarah probably would be upset if she even finishes in the 20s. So, but again, it's a super super strong fleet, and anything can happen. But I think if Clara can push Sarah just boat for boat at that event, that'll be a really strong performance for her, and it will reflect very well for the class moving forward. I don't know exactly what Sarah's going to do, even though we do talk regularly. I'm not sure what her plans are, short of winning a gold medal.
Right. So that's Ilka 6, and then the next one of the already qualified I wanted to talk about is the 49er full rig, the men's 49er. What are the stories there?
Well, there's, I think we've got Justin. Justin Barnes is kind of reprising his role as the crewman extraordinaire in that fleet. He seems to be the ticket to success for the last few quads. I think they're for sure gonna be the favorites again. They have a little bit of a lead, but again, that's a super competitive fleet, and what happened to Ali and Mariah is possible that could happen to them, which is if you don't make it, the gold fleet splits for the 49ers, the top 25. It's not just half the fleet. So you could still have a very good qualification series, but if one of the other teams gets into the top fleet, you may not have an opportunity to defend yourself.
Wow.
So,
I didn't know that. It's not in half, it's top 25 no matter how many boats there are.
Yeah, so that's where the gold fleet cutoff is. And then so that one's probably not as sealed up as it might look just on the points, because they run so many races as well. Like it's very easy to if you have a bad day, you start slipping pretty quickly. And I'd say I think the veteran group there is probably the favorites, but the boys pushing them are all getting stronger every event, and they're constantly improving. So they'll give them a good run for sure, and probably take that one down to the final day.
Yeah, that's amazing. Like, I don't know, I don't have it in front of me. There's got to be 70 or 80 boats, registered. So you're really not. Thank you for enlightening me on that, because you're not. Yeah, you could easily, just break into the gold fleet, and yeah, now you're not scot free, because then the guys in the silver can still, because you're still 35th, but you've got no chance of getting above 26 if you're in the silver fleet. So yeah, that really makes it a lot more interesting, actually. And if you talk about the other guys, well, first of all, yeah, Justin, I have heard, like, just on the side, that he's like top crew worldwide, like just, and I don't know how to measure that, but people looking know, like, that guy's getting the kite up faster than anyone in the world, or that guy, he's just supposed to be that talented.
Yeah, it certainly helps. That's a complicated boat, knowing what your settings are going to have to be, where you're going, being confident in everything you're going to have set up, and what your maneuvers are. It obviously makes a big difference. Like those boats, you really can't make a mistake on. You can make a little bit of a mistake in a laser, or sorry, an Ilka and a or the fin, and in those boats, but the 49er and the 49er effects, that everything's happening so fast, and they're on such a knife edge in terms of balance, that one little mistake and you're in the water, and then everybody's gone. So it makes a big difference, right? If you're eliminating most of the little mistakes that are so costly, it really puts you to the sharp end pretty quickly.
So yeah, the other crews in that, the other two teams in that competition, with the Staples brothers being, really on their grind for the longest time, been really working hard as sailors since they were like 10 years old, sailing together and stuff, and they're getting much closer to the other teams, and the other one being Ari Moffat and Hunter Hoy, who weren't, I don't think, together. They only got together not so long ago, right? So what can you tell me about those teams?
Well, I think the FX it's an interesting fleet. Sorry, the 49er is an interesting fleet, because the partnership is super important, obviously, but Justin seems to be able to move and bring the results. So it's really, I think, about time in the boat and being very comfortable with getting everything just right, the sailing it upwind, and having all the angles just dialed for the jives and stuff. So really, it's no real replacement for time together, and racing against other boats. And so those guys are coming through, and they'll be there and thereabouts. And I think if I had any advice for anybody that does in their first campaign miss out, is that the time where everyone's resting after the Olympics is probably the biggest chance you have to make big gains, because the other teams that have been, that have gotten there, they're taking a vacation, or they're taking a break, or they're reevaluating. So if you know that you're going to keep going, like, that's a really, like, crucial time to charge through and continue to grind, because you'll see, like, the start of the next quad, when everybody gets back together, you've got a big jump on, the new groups, and the groups that are sort of been taking a break. So that's
Well,
what I say for them.
Yeah, like Georgia and Antonia, right? 2021 Worlds, top 6, top 5, or whatever, and that really did catapult them. So yeah, that's 49 of that. So that could be really interesting now that I know about that top 25 thing. And again, I don't know the points, but maybe there's not like more than 20 points, is there, between Justin and Will and Ari
Yeah,
and
it's
Hunter?
I think it's about 11 points, and then
Oh, okay.
so I believe they came 39th, and then there's 50 and 52. So they've got a couple of guys behind them that aren't within shaking distance for sure. And as I say, in like in that middle of the 49er fleet, there could be a big, you could move up and down on an elevator pretty quickly. So we could, that nothing's for sure in that flight.
Yeah. So moving on to the last class that we already have qualified the country, which is the women's kite foiling, which was, I don't know if it was an upset that Emily got the spot at the Pan Ams, but certainly that's got to be the only, or that's got to have been our best chance to get a spot, right, at the Pan Ams at a smaller fleet. And that just puts into motion a great fight, because we got 4 women, I think, at Palma, 3 that are in that Europeans right now, and they're all very close. So that to me, after the Ali and Mariah, after Pan Ams, and we knew that who was qualified already, I think after women's 49er FX, my most popcorn-worthy fight was going to be women's kiteboarding.
Yeah, it's a new fleet. It's a new, obviously new to the Olympics this time, and I think that's when we, sitting on the performance advisory committee, and you're looking at how World Sailing had distributed the allocations, regionally, it looked like we were going to have a really good chance to get a spot in that fleet. And I think, the ladies have all gotten, that idea, for a few years. They've seen that, and I think it's been, for them, they've seen this as an opportunity that Canada is going to be sending somebody, and very likely was going to be able to send somebody in women's kiteboarding, and so this is they've all kind of risen to this challenge of taking it on, and it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, it's challenging, certainly, as a sailing organization, to build infrastructure around something that's kind of totally different. Most of these athletes are used to sailing off of a beach. They're not necessarily even members of a sailing club. They just kind of have the kit and they go out sailing when the conditions are right. And trying to integrate them into our performance program and building something so that we can support them has been interesting for sure. I know one of my old colleagues, Dan Cunningham, was leading just a process of how to actually develop kite sailing in Canada from a taking the structure that we have in sailing and how to run drills, and it's just even bringing them into this world. Here's how you do a start, here's how you time the start, and the strategies obviously are a little different. You got guys coming in on port and starboard at the start, and all the lines getting tangled up, and the rules are a little bit different. But it's certainly going to be exciting to see. I'm hopeful that the 49er fleet has been really leading the way in terms of coverage, and hopefully we can see that for kiteboarding, because I know that's really what the IOC is looking for, is to try and make sure we're delivering an exciting product. So inside of just the actual fight with Canada is going to be, can we see an actual product that's understandable, because it's a little bit harder for my eye to understand what's going on versus a normal fleet race. It's going to be interesting for sure, because as they are all getting better, it's going to be a battle between them, but also they have it's definitely, I remember in windsurfing, it's similar. There's time limits and stuff that are not necessarily easy to hit if you lose your kite, or if you go into the water. So again, for them, being able to, a consistent series is probably going to be the winner of that result.
Yeah. So for the 4 women that we have that are competing for the place, the 4 women are Martina Dekowitz, Emily Bujea, Marie-Eve Mariand, and Natalia Leshko. And so I had Emily on the show after she qualified at Pan Am's, and she I think comes from 29ers, and you're more regular kind of Canadian racing pathway, and the other women are from a completely different world of recreational kite sailing, moving into racing. So that's got to have its own issues in terms of trying to fold them into a real racing program, right?
Yeah, as I said, Dan, who they brought in to coach, wasn't necessarily a kiteboarder. I mean, he is now, but they he was brought in to sort of...
Who was that? I'm sorry.
Dan Cunningham.
Oh, Dan Cunningham. Yes, sorry. Yeah.
So he was brought in as a way to kind of integrate, guys that just launch off the beach and see what top speeds they can get, and flying pretty to down, like how to race, how to train for racing, how to build that structure into, just from going out onto the beach to, how to actually optimize your training so that, every day when you go out, you're building, skills and to your arsenal do, and that's, I think, the challenge for people that come from, that, alternative background, that it's not just that they're it's not just that they dialing in their performance, but how to optimize training, because you can't just go out for 8 hours, and not that that doesn't help, but you do need a lot more, dialing it in, and being able to sort of self-evaluate where you need to improve and stuff, like, and mark roundings and starts, and how to pick up the wind, and understanding shifts, and integrating that. That's probably, the challenge they're facing, where, somebody with the background that's come through the regular or more, regular sailing pathway probably has that, but doesn't necessarily have the subtleties of how they feel on the board as much. And so between those two things, as I say, I think the winner of that will be whoever sails the cleanest series, and is able to kind of score the most results.
Right, and so that's another question about that. So, the two qualifiers that as you mentioned before, are Palma and the Worlds, and this is one of the classes where the Worlds has not happened yet. It's in May, right after Palma. So all of those women will have a chance. They'll have to do both events. Is that right?
Yeah, I would expect that the winner will be somebody that's done both events. I guess in theory, it's possible you could do one, but really well at one. But I think ultimately, because there's a few of them racing, it's going to be the best of two. I think in that scenario, it actually works in our favor to send the best person, because they're all, punching up and trying to get, build all the skills they need. The later we go with the qualifications, the more likely we're going to have the person who's on the upswing the best going into the games.
Right.
Some fleets,
sorry, go ahead.
They want to have, certainly the athletes that feel confident that they're at the top. They probably want the qualifications done well in advance, so that they can, focus on their training, go into their international training groups, and whatever they need to do, fundraising, and so they can turn their attention that way. But in classes where, we may not necessarily have a medal, podium potential athlete right now, there's no need to rush the trial. So it's fortunate that in this class that the Worlds is going to be in, the middle of May, and then that'll more than likely have the best, and probably I might go out on a limb here, but the person that does the best at that event is probably going to be the one that ends up going.
Right. Well, that'll jive quite nicely into now my new section of being the classes that we don't have the country qualified. And the first one that I would mention, since we're talking about kite foiling, is Mac Moran, who is a veteran, has been going at this for a while now. Just on a logistical level, he's going to do Palma, but we haven't got the country, so he'd have to do Last Chance Regatta. But are there any other kite foilers up for it? Is there anyone he's racing against?
Well, I think there was some, there was a group of men that were in this quad working towards, building that, being the guy. But I think Mac kind of kept a stamp on that one, and has been able to, I don't want to say chase the others away, but they, I think they've drifted into, other pursuits at this point. So he's kind of up to him to get a spot and secure the country for us in the Last Chance event. So I think, in a way that works, that can work in your favor because you can just focus on, again, your development and everything you need to do to work on yourself and not be, not having, an eye wandering over to the other guys and how they're doing. But certainly, anybody that's faced with the last chance qualification, it's not necessarily where you want to be doing it because it leaves you kind of, you're up in the air going into it. So that has its own pressure.
Right. Right. Actually, yeah. So I did say we were going to get into that. This is something new, as far as I know. This last chance regatta, which is going to happen in May at I think, right.
Yeah, it's in yours. And so that's kind of used to be the other, we'll say the other event that was internationally one of the big stage setters for the year. It hasn't been maybe as popular lately because I think in France people are really focusing on Marseille as it's a similar style venue, but everybody focuses on the Olympic venue, in the quad. So here's typically can be the Mistral can come through and it's almost impossible to sail. Like they cancel days because it's too windy, but that's a new format because as I was sort of alluding to with the shorter quad down to 3 years, they had done it where there was the World Championships and then every fleet's second World Championships was going to be, so I think it was 40% were given out in the World Championships and 30% were then given out at the subsequent World, fleet class World Championships a year before the Olympics. And then the regional and continental qualifiers took place sort of afterwards. So this is a new format, and I'm not sure that they'll keep it in the next quad, but the idea was basically because they were only having, I think, more than half of the spots were given out at the World Championships or the places, that the last chance event was going to be for all the countries after all of the other qualifiers had finished. Some might argue that this favors the Europeans and kind of is like earmarking an extra set of spots for them because it's in their backyard and it allows the geographics to be a little more favorable to them. But in the end, if it was at a World Championships or if it's at ERs, it's roughly the same thing in the end. It's just actually fewer spots than for your prior quads were sort of allotted.
Right. Because, yeah, I guess I thought that it was something that they just added for, to build up the suspense or whatever. Like, oh, we've got this new thing where you can get a spot at the very end. So you're saying that was more of a logistical thing than that.
Well, I think so. I think ideally they would rather, certainly from the IOC's perspective, they'd rather have these things kind of settled earlier. There's a few other ways they give out spots. There's also, it's called, in sailing they call it the wild card spots, but in the IOC it's got a name. It's like the tripartite spots, and it's basically allocated by the IOC, and so they like to choose countries that haven't qualified. And they start that process. They've already started that process, and they'd be looking at who they were going to nominate for those places, and usually they do that, and those are typically the last spots that are given away, and they'd like to have that finalized, usually before this event is even happening. So I think it's kind of an exciting way to organize it, calling it sort of like the repechage or whatever you terms that
consolation round, yeah.
Yeah, so. But it's certainly going to add some excitement and leave some people, pressing to get those spots. It's going to, across all the fleets, that'll certainly be an interesting one to watch because not just for us in the fleets that we're supporting, obviously, is the all the countries that are unqualified are going to be, scrapping it out there.
Right. Yeah, the last chance regatta. So we talked about Mac. Mac will, he'll do whatever he'll do at Palma, sort of training towards the last chance regatta, because that's really going to be, since there's nobody else going for it in the men's kite foiling, that's his big event. And I think, what did I look? I saw it. Men's kites has five spots left. So there's a chance. Like that's in all these classes. Like I guess theoretically, and I haven't done this yet, but if you kind of went through every World Championships and you saw who was already qualified and which country, where you line up country-wise, and you did all the math, you might think, oh, okay, so I guess he will do that. Like, which countries do I need to beat to get into this spot with there only being 5 spots? I mean, I don't know what the chances are. Even from like the Ilka fleet that I know, the people sailing more than the other fleets, it does seem like a real crapshoot.
Yeah, it's one of those things that even if you had we'll say pre-event rankings and seeded which countries you thought were going to perform, in some fleets you might have a bunch of people from one country that are going to be really strong, and you'd feel pretty good that one of them is going to be able to perform. A lot of countries that are in this position may only have one person competing, and if they don't have a good day, or they don't have, if they get their nerves and the butterflies a little too too strongly, they might not perform. It even happens at the Olympics where you see some really surprising results in both directions. And so to say there's a chance, of course there is, but you would be surprised sometimes that with all that pressure, some people this is like they might feel crushed by it, and that depending on the fleets, like I say, I don't know exactly where we might slot him in the rankings, but certainly if he has a great event and some of the other countries athletes are buckle under the pressure, you could see some pretty good outcomes for us.
So theoretically now, we're let's move on to Ilka 7, where we have half the country competing for the event, all incredible sailors from top to bottom.
If you look at it, Luke had a great Worlds, and Mike and Fila probably both disappointed, and Ben Flowers, another guy that has had great results at times. And so you'd really like to have the whole group of them in there, and whoever's having a great day can get the job done for us.
But so if we were going to go over that World Championship, so I like Luke Rutenberg. Luke Rutenberg is in first. He was the only guy to make the gold fleet. I don't know Luke. He's from Nova Scotia. He's been working really hard as an Ilka 7 sailor for the longest time. And what a great event for him to get into the gold fleet and put that much space between him and then in second place we got Mike Lee, who's two-time Olympian but hasn't really been campaigning in the Ilka 7 at all, and he's getting better every race when I look at his results. And somebody with that much experience and talent could easily pull up from behind. So that's an interesting battle for sure. You must know Mike from those times back then.
Yeah, I Mike. So I guess the way it worked for Mike is he's living in Australia, and he saw the opportunity to jump in there. His story, I mean, I'll paraphrase it, and he might want to correct some points here, but I understand what. He really launched out of Royal Van when he moved to Australia, and he started training with Tom Slingsby back when Tom Slingsby was young. And they were sort of the guys that started the really big push on road bikes and all the physical training. And so when he came back to Canada, and he just kind of blew the doors off everybody. And I think he's got, I think he came 6th in the Worlds in Halifax, and he's got an 8th at the Olympics and in the laser. I mean, it was a bit of time ago. I know myself and Greg Douglas, we jumped into the laser fleet for the Canadians like last summer without any training, and I don't think we expected to win, but it was pretty humbling to get back in and think you still got it, and realize how much rust you can have from that much time away from a boat. So certainly the conditions there weren't helpful to us either, because it was pretty light. But seeing guys like I think I think it was Norm that won that, and it was like, he won it running away. So Mike, if he's really putting his head down and doing this, and he's feeling healthy, I think part of the reason he moved into the 470 was because he was having he developed some back problems from like hiking the boat isn't, it's not really a natural position. So I guess over the years it had kind of broken him down a bit, and that was why him and Luke moved into the 470, and I guess he's feeling pretty good now, and that's why he's decided to jump back in. So I'm not entirely sure what his regiment is at this point, but if he's really locked in and fully on board, like that gap isn't that big if you think about Mike Lee's historical results in the fleet. If he can find some of the form that he had back in the 2000s, then there's a good chance that you'll see him rocket up the rankings.
What a story that would be. I mean, all these guys, Luke and Ryan and James and Ben Flowers, all these guys have been just working their asses off for the whole quad. And if Mike comes in at the last second and gets it, now, fair and square, right? I had Luke Ramsey on the podcast. He was so cool, and I really enjoyed having him on, and I tried to make the argument that he is one of the best sailors in Canadian Olympic history, if take the different classes and so forth. And he's like, I wouldn't put myself in that category, but I would say Mike Lee, I would put him as one of the top men's sailors in history, in Canadian history. So, what are you going to do if you got somebody that's that good, and it's all still in your body, as long as you can get your body back into shape.
But you see it in the other class. I know we haven't talked about it yet, but is the foiling class. It'll be interesting to see how they integrate it, because it used to be if you could pump yourself onto a plane, you're going to be miles ahead of everybody else in the fleet. And I think I'd like to say the Finn fleet was very fit, but I'd say that looking at how much input is required in the old windsurfing fleets, like that was basically just like running a marathon at a full sprint the whole time. So those fleets, it'll be interesting to see how they adapt with the foiling. It's like I'm sure it's a lot harder to pump onto a foil plane and then maintain that. So there's probably a lot going on there as well, but that's probably the most physical class still.
So that's where I was going to go next, was our IQ foil women sailor, who is Nicola Gurkey. I mean, what can you say about this woman? She's a complete legend, not just as a sailor, but as an Olympian. She was the oldest Olympian last year for Canada. And I think when she got back into this, doing the IQ foil class, she wrote something on the Wind Athletes page, like there's only 45 women on Earth that have done 6 Olympics or something like that. So that was one of her goals. But anyway, she's still, racing world championships and Palma. What can you say about her chances and her, and what just her?
Well, yeah, she's obviously spectacular. I know now she's she works as a kind of a career motivator coach, and she gets brought into the boardrooms to talk about the transitive properties of competitive sailing and being an Olympian and all of that. And I did get a chance to talk to her in Tokyo a fair bit, and she's just got an incredible attitude, just to be around her and listen to her and her approach. And she's she can be business. She's very business, when it comes to her performance, and she's got it pretty dialed at this point in terms of what she needs and what she's got to do, and she knows what it's going to take, and she knows how much she's going to have to commit and how much she has to pour into it. So she's it's really spectacular. She's sailed in different boats. She's done it in different classes. She obviously just has an absolute love of the sport to be able to continue to, because it's not all champagne and celebrations, right? Like there's a lot of grinding that goes into it, and if you don't love the process, you wouldn't be able to last one quad. So to be able to do it for 6 is she really has a special desire to be able to, wake up every day and know that she wants to keep doing it no matter what.
So we're talking about Nicola Gerke, who is now sailing in the IQ foil event, which would be a new event for the Olympics and for her. It's a foiling windsurfer, and she did the Worlds and placed top Canadian, and the second place woman whose name is escaping me. She was on my podcast, and her name's Rebecca Heller, I think. So Nicola beat her at Worlds, and I think Rebecca has backed out of Palma. So we're only with Nicola at Palma, and I don't know. What are her chances? What do you have your finger on the pulse of the IQ foil women's sailing?
Well,
or what can you tell me?
I think when they envisioned the class, it's windsurfing. I think was maybe the first boat in sailing that was foiling, and then so this is going back to the those sort of colorful 80s videos. They were the first people that were trying the foiling thing, and so to say it's new would probably be disingenuous, but because it's been around. It's been technology that they've had for a long time, and they've really just kind of brought it back. I know on the men's side it's there's a couple guys that are just absolutely dominant forces, and I think they probably thought it was going to be maybe more exciting and closer racing, but the speeds that these guys go, it breaks off really fast. I mean, for her to jump into this, it is going to be a big challenge because it's totally new. She's got experience sailing the NACRA though, which was a foiling boat.
That's right. Yeah.
It's a testament to she can just do anything, just kind of like Luke. If it's sail powered, she's going to find a way to get it done. So I would definitely, I'd say there's no way you could count her out. I think if she's pursuing this, it's because she believes she's on the correct arc that she needs to be on to get it done. So that would be, I'd say, I think, certainly wouldn't rule her out.
Right. So she would be going to Last Chance Regatta as well. And then finally, I guess this is finally, we have the NACRA 17, which, I had Galen and Maddie on the podcast, and they kind of were saying that they really weren't thinking about 2024 as a realistic goal, but here they are. There's every chance that they or the other new team, Carly and Casper, pushing them. So that's a battle and a possibility as well.
Yeah, I think that's an area I know probably they wish there was more that we could offer them in terms of support. It's an incredible boat. It's very, watching this, super neat to see, and I'd love to be able to. I'm probably a little too big to get on one myself and have it just submarining the whole time. But for them, it is, a big step for them to get to the level they need to be at, and it's hard in Canada because, it's good that there's another crew now pushing them, but, we just, and the flip side to the institutional knowledge we'll say we have for single-handed sailing, we kind of have a dearth in terms of catamaran sailing, and, that we do have Oscar Johansson coming fourth in the Tornado class back in 2008, but ultimately they did that almost on their own as well, and that's the challenge is being able to get the training group you need to really launch your development. It's hard to just sail around by yourself and understand how far you need to go, or what your settings need to be, or what the shortcuts you have with a really strong training group versus being kind of off on your own. And so that's kind of the bigger challenge, I think, for them, is that's a tough boat. It's certainly not a cheap boat to cart around. It doesn't fit on a carry-on suitcase. It's like the IQ foil or the windsurfing, or so the kite foiling guys. So it's hard for them to organize. So that'll probably be their big challenges. They'll go into this event, obviously open mind and do everything they can to qualify, but really they have to be looking at their big challenge will be logistically organizing themselves so that they can get where they need to be a contender in the LA Olympics. But fortunately for them and all of our Canadian sailors is that it's going to be in our backyard in 2028, and there'll be a lot more opportunity for these groups to be forming in North America because LA is a fantastic place to sail. It's LA. It's warm. It's sunny. It's not a hard sell, and everyone's going to be trying to prepare for the Olympics in the venue. So they'll have a lot more opportunity to really make those leaps, I think, in the next squad. But that's going to be what they have to set out, is they have to really in those like bigger groups where they are the underdog, they have to start forming the friendships that it takes to build those training groups and understand logistically what they're going to need to do to be able to make the leap up.
Right. Well, geez, that takes us to the end, I think, of our preview of Princess Sofia Palma Regatta. Rob, thank you very much for coming on the podcast and helping us preview this regatta and the Olympic dream that we have here in Canada.
Well, thanks again for having me, and look forward to seeing how it all shakes out.
Excellent. So, like I tag out, I like to say, have fun, make friends, sail fast. I'll see you on the water.